I didn't mean to overhear it. That's the truth. I was refilling my glass at the kitchen counter while the rest of the family crowded around the dining table, plates clinking, laughter slightly too loud. Christmas dinner always sounded like that in my parents' house. Warm on the surface, sharp underneath. My mother leaned closer to my father, voice lowered but not enough. If we time it right, she said, she won't say no. She never does. My father hummed in agreement. Once the boxes are there, it'll feel permanent. I froze, glass halfway to the tap. My sister laughed softly. The kids need stability. Clara has space. It just makes sense. There it was. The plan wrapped in holiday cheer and entitlement. My condo. My space. Decided without me like always. I stayed where I was, heart steady in a way that surprised me. No rush of anger. No hurt swelling up. Just clarity. My name is Clara Vaughn. I'm 35 years old, and at Christmas dinner, I overheard my parents planning to move my sister and her family into my condo. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts. It means more than you know. I walked back to the table with a smile I didn't feel. Sat down. Passed the gravy. Nodded at the right moments. Years of practice had made that easy. My condo wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms. Clean lines. Morning light that hit the living room just right. I'd bought it on my own, quietly, without fanfare. I never mentioned the price because numbers in my family had a way of turning into expectations. My sister had always needed more. More help. More forgiveness. More room. When she married, the need doubled. When the kids came, it became unquestionable. Family helps family, my mother liked to say. Usually right before volunteering my time, my money, or my space. After dinner, while everyone was distracted with dessert, I slipped onto the back porch. Cold air hit my face, sharp and grounding. Christmas lights flickered along the railing. I breathed in and out slow. I remembered being 12, standing in my bedroom doorway while my parents discussed moving my sister in temporarily after one of her breakups. Temporary had lasted almost a year. I'd learned then that temporary meant flexible. And flexible meant me. When I went back inside, the conversation had shifted. Laughter again. Harmless. As if nothing had been decided. I didn't confront them. I didn't warn them. I let the night end the way it always did, with hugs and promises and assumptions. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a group message. Mom, we talked last night and think it's best if your sister stays with you for a while. Dad, it'll help everyone. Sister, the kids are so excited. I stared at the screen, then set the phone down. I smiled. Over the next few weeks, I let them prepare. I watched from a distance as my sister packed boxes and posted about new beginnings. My mother stopped by my condo to measure for furniture. My father asked about parking permits. I didn't say no. They mistook my silence for consent. That was the mistake. What they didn't know was that I'd already listed the condo. Quietly. Privately. I worked with an agent who understood discretion. No signs. No open houses. Just serious buyers. I signed papers while my family argued over who would take which room. One evening, my sister sent photos of packed boxes lined up against her wall. Almost ready, she wrote, followed by a heart emoji. I replied with a smiley face. The sale went through faster than expected. Clean. Efficient. The buyer wanted to move quickly. I agreed. On the morning of closing, I stood in my living room one last time. The space echoed softly, stripped down to essentials. Sunlight streamed in through bare windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. It smelled faintly of cardboard and something ending. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. That afternoon my parents called. Mom, we're on our way with the first load. Dad, unlock the door. I didn't answer. By the time they arrived, the locks had been changed. I watched from across the street as their car pulled up, confusion rippling through the group. My sister knocked. Then knocked harder. My mother's hands fluttered. My father checked his phone. 98 missed calls later, I turned my phone off. I didn't vanish in a dramatic way. I didn't leave the country or disappear into the night. I simply removed myself from a story I'd never agreed to be in. As dusk settled, Christmas lights flickered on across the block. Somewhere nearby, a radio played faint holiday music. I took one last look at the building, then walked away. They had planned my future without me. I chose something else. I spent the first night in a small hotel across town, The kind with neutral walls and quiet hallways that absorb sound. The room smelled faintly of clean sheets and lemon disinfectant. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, listening to my phone vibrate endlessly on the nightstand before I finally turned it face down. Silence came slowly like a tide receding. By morning the calls had stopped. In their place were messages, long, frantic, accusing. My mother's words blurred together. My father's were short and sharp. My sister's swung wildly between anger and disbelief. How could you do this to us? You ruined Christmas. The kids are crying. I read none of it all the way through. Instead, I ordered coffee and watched the city wake up outside my window. Cars moved steadily. A woman walked her dog. Somewhere, life continued without waiting for my family to catch up. A memory drifted in while I stirred cream into my cup. Me at 9 years old, standing at the top of the stairs, listening to my parents argue about money. My sister's name had come up again and again. Mine hadn't. I'd learned early that invisibility could be useful. The next day I met my realtor to finalize details. The paperwork was already complete, but there were keys to hand over, confirmations to sign. It was all straightforward. Professional. Quiet. The kind of ending that doesn't leave room for debate. Any regrets? She asked lightly as we stood in the empty condo. I looked around once more. The echo was gentle, not haunting. No, I said honestly. That afternoon I drove past my parents' house without stopping. Their driveway was full. Boxes stacked near the garage. I didn't slow down. I didn't need to see their faces to know what they were thinking. They had expected me to fold. Instead, I had stepped aside. The first real confrontation came 2 days later when my father showed up at the hotel. He stood in the lobby, coat still on, eyes sharp with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. You embarrassed us, he said. I protected myself, I replied. He scoffed. By selling your home out from under family? By refusing to give it away, I said calmly. He lowered his voice. Your sister needed help. She needed permission, I replied. Not assumption. He stared at me like he was searching for the version of me that would apologize. You've changed. Yes, I said. Because I stopped waiting. That conversation ended without resolution. He left shaking his head, muttering about selfishness and betrayal. I watched him go, feeling oddly detached. Like I'd already mourned something long before it officially ended. My mother tried a different approach. She called late that night, her voice soft, trembling. I don't recognize you, she said. I don't recognize the role you wanted me to play, I replied gently. He cried then. Real tears. For a moment, guilt pressed against my ribs. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. But I remembered the kitchen. The whisper. She won't say no. I needed you, she said. I needed respect, I replied. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was reflective. When she hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. My sister didn't call. She sent a single message instead. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time. I typed back. Then I put the phone away. Days passed. Christmas decorations came down across the city. Trees left on sidewalks. Lights switched off. The holiday faded, leaving behind its usual debris of unmet expectations. I moved into a short-term rental near the water. Smaller. Simpler. My mornings smelled like salt and coffee. Evenings brought quiet walks and time that felt unclaimed. The story spread through the family in fragments. Some reached out quietly asking if I was okay. Others avoided me entirely. I let it be. One afternoon my aunt called. She'd always been observant, rarely loud. They thought you'd adapt, she said. I always did, I replied. And now? Now I don't have to. She smiled through the phone. I could hear it. The hardest part wasn't losing them. It was shedding the version of myself they'd built their expectations around. The agreeable one. The flexible one. The one who filled gaps without being asked. I began to notice how often I'd minimized myself to keep peace. How many choices I'd delayed to avoid conflict. The condo hadn't just been property. It had been leverage. And I'd finally removed it from their hands. One evening as I sat by the water watching the sun drop low, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. We need time. I typed back slowly. So do I. It felt like the truest thing I'd said in years. That night I slept deeply. No dreams. No rehearsed conversations. Just rest. I realized then that disappearing didn't mean erasing myself. It meant stepping out of a narrative that had never included my consent. They had planned my future like an arrangement. I had answered with a decision. And for the first time that felt like enough. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Weeks passed, then a month. I settled into a rhythm that belonged only to me. Morning walks along the water. Coffee at the same small place where the barista learned my name without asking for my story. Evenings spent reading, windows cracked open, the faint sound of traffic humming like a distant ocean. I stopped waiting for my phone to light up. When it did, eventually the messages were different. Less frantic. More careful. My parents had run out of leverage and discovered something unfamiliar. Distance. My mother asked if we could meet. Neutral ground. A cafe halfway between our homes. I agreed, not because I owed her anything but because I was curious who she would be without expectations. She looked smaller when I arrived. Tired. Her coat still buttoned even though it wasn't cold. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," she said, fingers wrapped tightly around her cup. "I know," I replied. She stared at the table for a moment. "We thought you'd always make room." "For you," I said gently. "Not for me." She nodded, tears welling. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I believe that," I said. "But intention doesn't erase pattern." The words hung between us, not cruel, just true. We talked for an hour. About small things. About nothing. About everything we'd avoided. There was no dramatic apology. No reconciliation montage. Just acknowledgement. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "I miss you," she said. "I'm still here," I replied. "Just not available for that role anymore." He understood. Or at least she was beginning to. My father sent a message a few days later. Short. Direct. I was wrong to assume. I read it twice, then replied. "Thank you for saying that." It felt like a small bridge placed carefully, plank by plank. My sister remained distant. I accepted that. Some relationships don't survive boundaries because they were built on access, not connection. I didn't chase her. I didn't explain myself again. Life expanded quietly after that. I signed a lease on a place that felt right. I painted one wall a color my family would have called impractical. I hosted friends who laughed loudly and stayed late. No one asked what they could take. One evening, as I unpacked the last box, I found an old holiday card from years ago. A photo of my family, all smiles. I studied my own face in it, realizing how practiced my expression had been. I set the card down and didn't keep it. A memory surfaced then, uninvited but gentle. Me at 10, sitting on the stairs, listening to my parents discuss plans that didn't include asking me. My mother had said, "She'll adjust." I had believed that was love. Now I knew better. Love asks. Love listens. Love doesn't move boxes into someone else's life and call it generosity. At the next family gathering months later, I arrived without dread. The smell of charcoal drifted through the air. Laughter rose and fell naturally. People greeted me with a cautious warmth that felt earned rather than owed. My mother hugged me lightly. My father nodded. My sister kept her distance. It was okay. No one mentioned the condo. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dark. The night air was warm. Somewhere inside, dishes clinked. A radio played softly. I thought about how close I'd come to letting guilt decide everything. How easy it would have been to say yes, to adapt, to disappear into a life that didn't fit. Selling the condo hadn't been revenge. It had been punctuation. A clear end to a sentence that had gone on too long. If you've lived anything like this, tell your story, and don't forget to subscribe. Not because walking away is dramatic, but because choosing yourself is quiet work and it deserves witnesses. That night, back in my own place, I turned off the lights one by one. The rooms settled around me, familiar and steady. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a moment, listening. No whispered plans. No assumptions forming in corners. No future being decided without me. Just space. Just breath. Just me. For years I'd been flexible enough to bend into anyone's idea of family. Now I understood that strength wasn't in how much I could carry for others, but in knowing when to set something down. I didn't vanish. I arrived. Sometimes leaving is self-respect.